I said to you, Bishop, is it fair to say that Jesus is the answer for this issue?
The racial issues.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to tell the story? Or do you want to jump?
And I said, okay. No, it's not. It's not. It's an incomplete statement because, yes, if the world got saved and everybody really got truly saved and they had a heart-changing experience, then racism would not be a problem. But the reality is the black community and minority communities cannot wait, and poor white communities cannot wait for the world to get saved to have justice.
Got it.
The boys in prison can't wait who are on death row. The young people, the young mothers who are incarcerated in prison cannot wait on conversion to hit the judicial system in order for them to have justice. And the whole premise of the United States and our Constitution should afford us not to have a religious experience to have shared values and equal rights irrespective to our belief system.
So let me make sure I understand something, because this is a super interesting point. If Jesus is the answer, and that is a true statement.
Yes.
In this circumstance, it's an incomplete one, because not everyone that's controlling the narrative of what's happening in the United States and the world are believers.
Absolutely.
Okay? They disregard God. They disregard the things of faith. And I like the idea that the bishop is stepping in to the outside the walls of the church, and that you want to say a few things. So, have at it.
First of all, I think it's a misnomer to think that the early church didn't have racial problems. They absolutely did. Let's just talk about that for a second. And there was a great deal of bias built into the early apostles and Peter and his unwillingness to open up to the Gentiles, and it took a revelation from God for him to do that in the middle of his ministry. There was dispute between the Samaritans and the Jews back to the time of Jesus when the woman at the well said, "We have no dealing, your people have no dealings with my people." And the whole reason that Jesus tells the story about the Good Samaritan is to force the Jewish lawyer to accept a group of people that were alienated from the sociological constructs of what went on in Israel. So this is not new. This goes all the way back to Cain and Abel. We have been fighting about something ever since humanity began. So religion is not exempt from it. And also, I must admit that religion is complicit in the black and white aspect of it. There are many disputes all over the world, but when it comes to the black and white issue in America, religion has been complicit and doesn't like to admit that. Our missionaries were our masters. So the same people who taught us about Jesus beat us and cut our foot off and hung us and castrated us. So that creates a very odd scenario. When you look at the slave Bibles, the early slave Bibles, in their own museums up at the National Institute for African Americans in New York, redacted out of the Bible was the stories about Moses. Redacted out of the Bible were the stories about neither bond nor free, all one in Christ Jesus. They gave the slaves things, partial Bibles with things like slave obey your masters. That's a part of the story. When you look at the fact that Southern Baptist Church just in the last 10 years apologized for their role in slavery. When you look at the fact that the early slave castles in like Elmina in Ghana have churches above them, and the women were being raped beneath them. Religion can't just walk away and say, we don't have an obligation or responsibility to be involved in correcting this problem because we influence even secular ideas about culture and morality in the most interesting way. But I think a deeper point is this. We're not really just talking about the hearts of men. We're talking about systems that were built sometimes intentionally and unintentionally that were biased. It's like opening up a restaurant and you have all your favorite foods. And then you have a customer base who maybe likes something different than you like. When it comes into privilege, when you design the country and you design the system and you design the criminal justice system and you design those sorts of things, you design them in such a way that the system is geared against us. White privilege isn't always about white evil. It's as simple as my iPhone. I use this illustration. My iPhone has a image recognizer. The only problem is it has a hard time recognizing me because all of the people in Silicon Valley that designed the phone were young white guys. So the phone recognizes, and that you can Google this and find this out. The phone does not recognize minorities, not only blacks, but browns and Asians. It doesn't recognize the face as easily because the system is designed for white people. Okay, take that from the phone, which has no heart, has no emotions, has no prejudice, just programming, and put it over in the criminal justice system. And you start to see the inequities where we commit the same crime. I'm 7 times more likely to be incarcerated than you. There's an economic factor in there too. It's not just racial. It's also court-appointed attorneys. It's also bias in the system between the police officers and the DA, and how our political system has worked. Both Democrats and Republicans have made office over, if you think back over the last 20 years, on being tough on crime, all the way back to the Reagan era on up, the Clintons, everybody has used it. I'm going to be tough on crime. They got elected. Well, tough on crime was code for tough on us. And so when you look at that kind of situation, it's not as simple as the Romans rogue and giving them John 3:16 and the world's going to sing Kumbaya and we're all going to wash each other's feet and we're going to be fine. I don't need my feet washed. I need equal housing, equal jobs.
Right.
I wash my own feet. I don't need all of that stuff going on. I need a pathway out of a criminal justice system that has not corrected itself. The laws have changed and people are still in jail for things that are no longer illegal. Some people are in jail for years waiting on trials through plea bargain agreements. Those sorts of things that we know to be wrong, that both Democrats and Republicans agree to be wrong, yet we have not been reticent or readily focused on fixing them because we don't fix well things that don't affect us.
You explained that to me in the pre-show we did back in the green room, where you were explaining that white people don't have to know much about African American people, but African American people have to go through white people for a lot of things. Explain what you were telling me back.
Well, some of the best-selling books on the Times list right now and elsewhere are books on Black history because Black Lives Matter did a service to the country in that it made whites realize that maybe they didn't know the whole story. So our books are selling really well, and even though I didn't write any of them on that subject, thank you for that. The point being that you can get a PhD and have the option not to go into South Dallas, learn anything about Black culture, go to a Black church, read a Black magazine, read a Black book, and may not have a Black professor all the way to a PhD program. I can't get a GED without understanding you. I can't go through school. I have to go through whites to go to the bank. I have to go through whites when I'm getting ready to buy a car. I have to go through whites when I was in early school system. I went to school with 95% white kids. I have to learn how to like your music. I have to learn how to dress the way you dress. I have always had to assimilate, not just integrate. I had to assimilate in order to be appropriate in certain settings. So there's a disadvantage when you write the books you read. Then your truth about what happened in this country is based. People never write a book where they're not the hero. Why would you do that? Why would you write a book that made you look bad? So anytime you write the books you read, whether you're Black, white, or brown, you're always a hero. It's like talking to a married couple. When you talk to her, she's always good. He's
always
crazy.
Right.
Yeah, she's right. I may have a few faults, but and you talk to him and he's, everybody has a story that they tell themselves to be true that may not be true. And that's okay, that's human, until your story affects my life. When your story affects my job and it affects me being able to be there for my children, when your story says, this is America. Oprah Winfrey's doing good, T.D. Jakes is doing good, and you can name 4 or 5 people who are doing good, never realizing the fact that you can name us out of 40 million people says we're not doing that good. Try to name all the white people that are doing well. You can't do that. The very fact that you have a quick list of people that you quote unquote think are doing well is a sign that our system doesn't work. I'm not so worried about the hearts. I'll leave that for Sunday morning. I think God can change the hearts. I'm worried about the system, legislation changing in the way we educate, and changing. I don't think that all cops are bad. I think most of them are very good. I don't want to live in a world that doesn't have police officers. I call them too much. I will call them in the name of the Lord and pray for you while they come. So I don't have
While you're
anything
bleeding.
against police officers, but like ministers, like priests, like anybody else, they go rogue. And when they go rogue, they are protected through immunities that create legal immunities that create unfair biases. Their records are withheld. They get to see the evidence before they fill out the reports. In the last 3 black murders, we have found the reports that they found to be contradictory to the evidence that was submitted. So you can't count on them for truth. And when they are bad, we do the same thing that the Catholics did with bad priests. We move them to different precincts like they moved them to different parishes, because there is no federal regulation that mandates that their records be made and exposed to everybody.